It's actually a really good garlic bread. Garlic bread is my favorite food. I could honestly eat it for every meal, or just eat it all the time without even stopping.
You get fat.
No, why would I get fat?
Bread makes you fat.
Bread makes you fat?
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at the garlic bread from Scott Pilgrim versus the World. A concept which, like last week, I know is a bit of a reach, but I made a lot of pizza for this Thursday's basics, so I needed appropriate accompaniment. To start, we're using this frozen garlic bread as a sort of control group. This is what I grew up eating on spaghetti and meatballs night, so once prepared according to package directions, it seems like a good place to start. And right away, there's a few obvious ways in which we can improve. First off, there's no fresh garlic, and perhaps just as concerning, in place of real butter, there's margarine. That being said, it's still toasted bread with garlic and butter flavor, so it tastes really good. Or perhaps that's just my nostalgia talking. Either way, we've still got plenty of room for improvement, starting with fresh bread. The obvious direction to go is with your standard supermarket Italian loaf. I personally like sesame seeds for their added texture and flavor, and once our loaf is vivisected, it's time to slather it in compound butter. That is 1 stick of lightly softened, unsalted butter into which we're going to crush 3 garlic cloves. Basically, the more you break down your garlic, the more garlic flavor you're gonna get, which is why I opt for the garlic press. Next up, some freshly minced herbs, about 2 tablespoons each, finely chopped basil and parsley, bringing a lot of much needed dimension to our garlic bread. We are then generously kosher salting and freshly ground peppering and mashing into a cohesive paste, otherwise known as compound butter, which I personally think you should have in the fridge at all times, right next to the ketchup and your leftover Taco Bell sauce packets. The next step is, of course, to generously and evenly slather it on top of our bread. From there, you've got 2 options for baking. You could either sandwich it and wrap it in foil, baking at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 20 minutes, which is going to give you a crisp exterior and soft interior, but is going to leave the garlic kind of uncooked. I personally prefer to bake open-faced at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 7 to 8 minutes, until the bread is crisp and the little chunks of garlic are just starting to turn lightly blonde around the edges. And there you have it, some easy, homemade, garlicky, buttery, herby, crispy soft carbohydrate bombs. Perfect for serving with pizza or pasta or any other food that's just bread in a different shape. How can we possibly improve upon this seemingly perfect side dish? Well, America's Test Kitchen has a rather innovative way to both max out garlic flavor and evenly toast the bread. They start by microplaning their garlic into 4 tablespoons of melted butter. This ruptures more cell walls, which creates more garlic flavor, which they then microwave for 30 seconds to mellow it back out. Then to bring some of the long roasted garlic flavors, they combine 1 teaspoon each garlic powder and water, which apparently activates the garlic flavor in the garlic powder. Add the microwaved butter and fresh garlic mixture, along with 1 teaspoon salt, 1/4 teaspoon cayenne pepper, and 4 more tablespoons of refrigerator cold butter, which is going to sort of re-thicken this butter mixture into a spreadable paste. A simple finger dip confirms that it is delicious and extraordinarily garlicky. This is getting spread atop our halved Italian loaves by sort of placing a channel of it down the center of the loaf and then using an offset spatula to spread evenly and prolifically, before placing on a rim baking sheet and baking at 450 degrees Fahrenheit for about 4 minutes. And then this is where the real innovation starts. We are first flipping our loaves and then lightly compressing them with another baking sheet, which we're going to leave on there as it returns into the oven for another 5 to 10 minutes. This is going to ensure that the cut side of the bread is exposed evenly to the heat, gorgeously toasting both the bread and the nice pasty garlic. Now, I'm sure you will agree that this is both a handsome and unique loaf of garlic bread, sort of like the Dan Levy of garlic bread. It's unconventional and it's neat and crisp, and I just want to eat them up. But unlike Dan Levy, I actually found this to be a little too garlicky, and I think that there's a bread that's going to respond better to this pressed toast method, a bread that positively loves being pressed and toasted, pan cubano. Into the bowl of a stand mixer goes 480 grams of bread flour, 1 packet or 7 grams of instant yeast, 2 teaspoons or about 8 grams of sugar, tiny whisked to combine, and then pan cubano's unique claim to fame, 55 grams of melted lard, along with 300 milliliters of room temperature water. We're going to add that gradually as the dough comes together, adding 12 grams of kosher salt once it forms a ball of dough, and kneading on medium speed for about 10 minutes or until a firm but supple dough forms, which we're going to pull down off the dough hook, form into a ball, and drop into an oiled bowl for 1.5 hours for its first bulk ferment. Cover it tightly in plastic wrap and let rest at room temperature until it's doubled in size. Once bedoubled, it's time to form it into its final form, that being a long torpedo-shaped loaf that we're going to coax it into on a well-floured work surface. Retrieve the dough and turn it out on said work surface and begin patting it out into a large rectangle. We're aiming for about, 8 by 12 inches. And then, as is the procedure with most enriched doughs, we're going to begin rolling it up from the bottom, pinching as we go, pressing as we go to make sure that there are no bubbles, and pinching the seam underneath the resultant loaf. Which, oh dear, that looks rather not safe for work there. We're just gonna pat that out into more of a torpedo shape. And then we're placing diagonally on a rimmed baking sheet dusted with cornmeal, which is both gonna prevent it from sticking and add a nice crunchy bottom to our final loaf. Then we're gonna cover with some generously oiled plastic wrap and let rise at room temperature for another hour until it's about doubled in size. Then we are preheating the oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit because this guy is ready to get baked. The only thing left to do is score it lengthwise across the top. Apparently this is traditionally done with a palm leaf, but I didn't have one of those handy. And then we're baking for 20 to 25 minutes until lightly browned and its thickest point registers about 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Then we're letting it cool completely about 3 hours before slicing and turning into garlic bread. As you can see, this bread has a nice tight but still airy texture, which thanks to the lard toasts up beautifully. I was a little overwhelmed by the microplaned garlic, so I'm headed back to the garlic press, slicing my bread in half and trying out 2 different methods for buttering. I'm worried about the herbs burning, so I'm going to slather 1/2 with the plain old garlic butter, which I will subsequently sprinkle with fresh herbs upon completion, and with the other I am adding my fresh herbs to the butter before I commence to slathering. Both are being subjected to the same 450 degree Fahrenheit oven for 4 minutes before being flipped and weighted, which is great not only because it toasts the bread evenly, but it also prevents the garlic from burning and turning acrid in the oven. So no matter how you prep your garlic and what kind of bread you use, I cannot recommend this method enough. About 6 minutes later, and they emerge from the oven looking just about perfect. We got our herby loaf in the back, and in front our plain garlic loaf that I'm going to sprinkle fresh herbs upon before slicing and serving. Now the first thing I'll cover is the bread. I love pan cubano for garlic bread. The interior is soft and moist and buttery, and the exterior is crunchy and almost crumbly in a most unexpected and pleasant way. Next up, the herbs. The herbs in the compound butter version weren't burnt, but their flavors were definitely dulled and muted by the heat of the oven. The fresh herbs version, especially when finished with a little bit of flaky mold and salt, was the clear winner. Pressing the garlic rather than microplaning it made the flavor a lot less harsh and overwhelming, and the addition of fresh basil and parsley added some much needed herby contrast. Now this was the Dan Levy of garlic bread. Not entirely sure why I'm using him as a metric for garlic bread, maybe because I just can't get enough of him.